Humans live within cultures. In trying to understand human psychology then, one approach, or one of the levels of explanation that can be used, is cultural. This video will explain some of the basic ideas that have been developed in this kind of research. I start this video by explaining what culture is, more or less, and how it makes sense to talk about it in the context of psychology. After that, I will discuss important concepts like socialization, time, and ethnocentrism. Then I explain how cultures can be thought of as individualistic or collectivistic. I will give an overview of Schwartz's theory of basic values and Hofstede's on cultural differences. I will continue by explaining how cultures are connected to emotions and how they even influence observations. In the end, I will provide a short summary. My name is Jouni Vilkka, and this is my channel, TFF Teacher from Finland. Don't forget to subscribe and click the thumbs up button. We necessarily carry our culture always within our minds, as values, beliefs and traditions, and even more fundamentally, as language and ways of interpreting the communication and other behavior of other people. Culture is a way of organizing the life of a community. As the structures of our thinking and understanding, it is very difficult to even notice, like a fish in water might not notice the water it swims in. But just like the fish can sometimes reach the surface and become aware of the difference between what is below and what is above the surface, so too can we humans sometimes become aware of our own culture when we come into contact with another culture. Sometimes it can come as a shocking clash, but other times it can be a pleasantly eye-opening experience. Some of the aspects of culture can be objective, directly observable physical things, such as buildings or clothing. Other aspects are subjective, within the minds of people, but not directly observable by others, such as norms, roles, beliefs and values. Gerd Hofstede, sorry about the pronunciation, has devised a pyramid model of psychology to explain the different strata or levels of explanation, as I have been referring to them. At the bottom is our shared biological genetic foundation and the abilities they make possible. These include the ability to experience and express emotions and to learn a language, which makes conceptual, abstract thinking and highly detailed communication possible. The abstraction means that we are able to discuss even the past and the future, or even just possible events, as well as to tell fictional stories. The second level is that of culture, which imparts its members a set of values, attitudes, models of behavior, and other such things that the individual learns through the process of socialization. More about that in a bit. The highest level of this pyramid model is that of personality. The individual's innate temperament and life experiences form their personality. It is thus both biological and learned. Personality psychology will be covered later in a different course, by the way. Especially in the contemporary world, it is obvious that we are not members of just one culture, but there are actually many overlapping cultures. A culture can be a very broad thing, like Western culture, or something like a national, for example, Finnish culture. There are also small subcultures within them, which can be part of either broader level culture. The unifying features of subcultures can be such things as taste in music, style of clothing, values, customs, ways of speaking, and so on. It can be shared by people from different countries, so that members of the same subculture can share the subculture globally, while also being members of different local cultures. Even within countries, there can be several layers of local cultures. Contacts between different cultures tend to reduce the differences between them. The media, especially the internet and social media within it, make it possible for people of very different cultures to be in contact with each other far more extensively than ever before. Will this lead to all cultures eventually evolving into a single monolithic culture, or will it cause a backlash that will cause people to seek only the company of people physically close to them? I won't make predictions, but you may do so in the comments below. An individual's socialization process already begins in the last stages of development in the womb, when they begin to learn a language and even music. A baby exhibits effects of socialization already at under 3 months of age. As the child grows, the values, attitudes and behaviors of their parents strongly influence them. This phase, that in Western cultures at least occurs within the nuclear family, is called primary socialization. Secondary socialization happens later, under the influence of friends, education and the media. A teenager is no longer much influenced by their parents, but usually seeks their own place within the community. They will perhaps find a subculture or a counterculture that appeals to them. They will adapt gender roles as well as values and views about things like occupations. As they learn occupations, those will further impress certain roles, ways of thinking and being on them. Studying and working also often bring the person into contact with wider circles of people, other communities and even cultures. These will influence their worldview. Lev Vygotsky used the concept of internalizing to mean the way a person adopts the norms and ways of doing things from their community and culture, making them part of their own psyche. Externalizing then means expressing one's own experiences, thoughts and emotions by communicating in some way, such as through music or poetry or solving an engineering problem. The point is that the individual not only is affected by the surrounding culture through the socialization process, but also influences the surrounding culture the same way. One of the things people learn through socialization is the concept of time. For example, in Finland, we have a yearly calendar and days of the week with some special significance on some days. We also take the time of day seriously, so even in the winter, when it's dark most of the time, it still matters whether it's the morning or the evening for many cultural things. We have a fairly common time for lunch, for example, and certain office hours. If you have to go to the bank or to see a government official for some reason, you probably won't be able to do that in the evening. Luckily, most things like that can now be done online at any time. We also have other concepts related to time, such as screen time, as parents may try to limit how much time their children spend on computers and TV. We also take time very seriously in the sense that we expect everyone and everything to be on time. And if someone fails to be on time, we expect them to apologize for wasting our time. This means that time is a limiting factor for things like being together, for conversations and other things like that. If we have plans, or especially a scheduled meeting, we will not be very flexible about it. In other cultures, one might be expected to relax their schedule because of face-to-face conversations that take longer than originally expected. They value the interpersonal connection more than abstract time. When a person is not aware of the influence of their own culture on themselves, or if for some reason they believe that their own culture is in some way the best of all possible cultures, their thinking is ethnocentric. In the first case, they are not aware that they are doing it because they cannot help but do so. They lack the conceptual tools to overcome ethnocentrism. In the latter case, they know better, but still consider their own culture superior to others. That attitude has also been traditionally called chauvinism. Cultural pluralism is the opposite of ethnocentrism. It is the view that different cultures have their own characteristics that allow us to see how various opinions and values, our own included, depend on culture. That doesn't mean we couldn't discuss them and philosophically analyze their merits, but it should stop us from merely assuming that our beliefs and values are true or the best simply because they happen to be ours. Ideally, in my opinion, we should learn from each other, from all cultures and ways of thinking, and then adopt what is good and discard the bad. Cultures can be compared to each other, and one of the things assessed can be how individualistic or collectivistic the culture is. In the latter, people emphasize how everyone is a member of a community and needs to grow and adapt into their role in that community, whereas in individualistic cultures, the emphasis is on the independence and uniqueness of an individual. People in individualistic cultures stress their own achievements, duties, and especially rights. Collectivistic people talk about their shared goals, connections to each other, and the community. Social relationships are more fluid and changing in individualistic cultures, where joining and leaving all kinds of networks is fairly easy, and people might not see a need to stay in touch with their extended family. That is very different from typical collectivistic cultures, where families can be very important, and being in connection to fairly distant members of the extended family may be seen as necessary or a duty. Personal friends, on the other hand, might not be valued as much as in individualistic cultures, where friendships are often considered more important than even immediate family. Also, old people are usually highly valued in collectivistic cultures, while in individualistic cultures they may be seen as just ordinary people. The individualists are driven by their personal goals, personalities, and preferences. In collectivistic cultures, people are more likely to accept the values, norms, roles, and goals of the community, where they will find their place by fulfilling their assigned role. Now, the above is a description of the extremes, and actual cultures will be somewhere between the extremes. Finnish culture is typically considered to be close to the middle, but slightly more collectivistic than individualistic. Western cultures in general are thought to be more on the individualistic side, whereas Eastern and Southern cultures are typically more on the collectivistic side. Chinese culture is understood to be highly collectivistic, and the culture of the United States of America is considered to be among the most individualistic. Values mean desirable goals. Our choices reflect our values, as we usually have to make choices and can't just have everything we want. Some values are considered of higher importance than others. All cultures share many of the same needs, but they differ in how much they emphasize any particular value. In his study about cultural values, Schwartz has classified values into 10 categories in order to map out the value structures of different cultures, more or less like this. 1. Self-direction, independent thought and action, making one's own choices. 2. Stimulation, change, excitement, challenge in life. 3. Hedonism, pleasure, satisfying organismic needs. 4. Achievement, showing competence, success. 5. Power, social status, control over others and resources. 6. Security, safety, harmony, stability. 7. Conformity, restraint, inhibition of disruptive impulses, obedience. 8. Tradition, respect, commitment, customs, often religion. 9. Benevolence. Concern for others' welfare, honesty, loyalty, responsibility. And 10. Universalism. Tolerance, understanding, and appreciation of all people and nature, social justice, world peace, protecting the environment. Schwartz noticed certain consistent correlations between certain phenomena and changes in the value structure of the society in question. For example, when economic welfare increases, self-direction, benevolence, and universality also increase. When the level of education improves, self-direction also improves. When democracy is strengthened, stimulation and self-direction are enhanced. Gerd Hofstede studied especially national work cultures. He defined the following 6 different cultural dimensions to classify national characteristics. 1. Power Distance Index, PDI, describes how people expect and accept power to be distributed. A high score means a clear hierarchy, while a low score means power is distributed more evenly. For example, Finland has a low score, which can be seen in how informally we talk to our bosses. There is typically no single head of the family, and so on. 2. Individualism versus collectivism, IDV, is pretty obvious. Does the culture emphasize I or we? As I explained previously, Finnish culture tends to be close to the middle. 3. Uncertainty avoidance, UAI, rates how much ambiguity or uncertainty is tolerated in the culture. A high score means the culture has strict rules and makes claims to obedience to single absolute truth and clear roles for everyone, while a low score means that different opinions are accepted and there are fewer regulations. The score for Finland is lower than average. Formalities are not considered important, but schedules are, and rules are usually followed. 4. Motivation towards achievement and success, MAS, was originally called masculinity versus femininity. That is because of the sexist assumption that assertiveness, heroism, and such things are masculine traits. Femininity was understood as cooperation, caring for the weak, and quality of life. According to Hofstede, in masculine societies there is a gap between the views of men and women, although women do display more competitiveness as well. In feminine societies, men and women share the same views, if I am not mistaken. For example, Finnish culture is one of the most feminine in that we emphasize so-called soft values like equality, solidarity, modesty, cooperation, and so on. We seek compromises where everyone is heard and considered. I don't know if it makes sense to call that feminine, as to me it seems just rational, reasonable, and ethical. 5. Long-term orientation versus short-term orientation, LTO, measures how a society views its time horizon. A long-term view prioritizes future outcomes, while a short-term view focuses on the near future. Societies in the latter group, which Finland and most Western countries are in, live in the present and seek quick results. The first group values endurance, frugality, and adaptability. 6. Indulgence versus restraint, IND, refers to how much freedom is given to citizens to fulfill their desires, to have fun. A culture of restraint regulates such things with strict norms. A person's culture will affect how they interpret emotions. 1. The values, belief systems, and religions of the culture will be instilled in them from an early age. 2. The institutions like media, childcare systems, schools, and the education system in general, as well as the laws and other norms, will teach and enforce certain ways of thinking and behaving. 3. In their personal life, the individual will interact with members of the culture, who therefore also exhibit the same behaviors and emotional expressions. All these form the schemas or internal models about emotions the person learns and applies throughout their life. The kind of emotions they understand and the beliefs related to those emotions will provide limitations to how they can interpret and express their own emotions, as well as those of other people. For example, how much control over their emotions are they supposed to have? What kind of expressions and of which emotions are accepted or appreciated? All such things are understood by the person and they influence how they will behave. Among the most interesting cultural phenomena is how culture influences our observations. For example, according to a study on members of the Himba people in Namibia, found that the way they conceptualize colors is different from how typical Westerners conceptualize them. The Himba categorize colors into 4 groups. Their word Zuzu, excuse my pronunciation, includes at least what in English would be called dark blue, red and green colors, while Buru would mean other blue and green shades. When shown samples of colors, they could not identify blue samples as different from the green samples, which would be easy for Westerners like me. Instead, they could identify different versions of green better than the researchers could. The point is that language and concepts, the schemas available to us, play a significant part in what kind of observations can be made, much like Immanuel Kant claimed over 2 centuries ago. Another study on the influence of culture on observation was conducted by Jan B. Derekovsky in 1972 using what is called the Hudson test. The test involves showing the test subjects pictures that use visual cues to depict a 3-dimensional situation. Derekovsky found that subjects from some African cultures had difficulty understanding the pictures. They preferred images that showed animals showing all their legs, even if they were drawn as seen from above. According to the researcher, this is similar to how Western children also draw things until they are taught otherwise. The reason why the Hudson test was difficult for the test subjects may be due to the lack of exposure to European-style art. Being accustomed to seeing the animals in real life, they focus attention on observed textures and movement rather than the visual storytelling of still images used in the test. There are many approaches to studying culture, only some of them of interest to psychology or social psychology. Cultural studies is a completely separate set of humanistic sciences of its own. This video began with a short overview of culture as one important influence on human behavior and thinking. I then explained how the cultural approach to psychology understands socialization, through which the individual learns the ways of the community and adapts the culture. I explained how the way we view time is one of the things we learn through socialization. I then defined ethnocentrism and pluralism. I then explained some of the ways in which cultures can be compared by measuring how individualistic or collectivistic they are, which values are considered most important in them, and what other differences there may be between them. In the end, I explained how cultures influence the expression and interpretation of emotions, and even visual observations. Over several videos, I have now explained how psychology can be approached from 4 different angles: biological, mental, social, and cultural points of view. In the following videos, I will give some examples of phenomena studied by psychologists. I hope to see you back on my channel then. Bye for now. If you wish to support my channel, please click thumbs up, subscribe and share my videos. Any comments on the videos would also be welcome.